nowadays in our modern world, if a person follows a spiritual path, it tends to be a very deliberate act, a voluntary act, and more so than simply, oh, I was born in France, therefore I'm a devout Roman Catholic. Maybe 100 years ago that would have been true. But nowadays, if you're born in France, is that any guarantee that you're a very devout, dedicated Roman Catholic? Or you're born in England, that you'll be following the Church of England, or you're American, you'll be a Protestant or Roman Catholic, and so forth. I think clearly that's no longer the case. And so nowadays, in our world of modernity, which now permeates the East and the West, it's as much in Beijing, Taipei, and Mumbai as it is in Buenos Aires, Berlin, and New York. It's now global. That if one is following a spiritual path, to a much greater extent than in the past, I think, this is because of a deliberate choice. In my case, that was very clearly the case. And that is when I got into my late teens, especially when I got to the age of 20, I was really seeking. And I found a path that really seemed to suit me very well, that answered my questions, and really provided great meaning. And so it was a deliberate choice and entailed a lot of sacrifice. And so, does everybody want to find a spiritual path? The answer, I think, is empirically, obviously not. Many people, their path, that is, we all want to find happiness. None of us go out into the day and think, I want to suffer a lot today. What can I do to suffer today? So all of us would like to avoid suffering and to find some degree of satisfaction, safety, security, happiness if possible. But for many people, with that motivation, they will think, well, I must find the perfect spouse. I definitely want to have children. I want to have a secure job. I want to have a well-paying job. I want to live in a nice house. I want to have a good car. I want to have excellent insurance policy, and so forth. And so, in the pursuit of happiness and freedom from suffering, for many people, it's entirely oriented towards setting up and trying to sustain favorable outer circumstances, including having a really good doctor, a good dentist, and so forth and so on. So that is not a spiritual approach. It's not a bad approach. It's certainly not an evil approach, but it's not a spiritual approach. But there are many people, some of them young, some of them only learn this when they become older, that finding, especially if they've met with success, especially if they have success, and finally still there's a sense of dissatisfaction, a yearning for something more even though they have a happy family, a good job, financial security, and so forth and so on. Quite a number of people finding, isn't there something more, right? In my case, I was very vividly aware of needing something more when I was 20, but I think that was in part due to the fact that I have very loving parents. I had a very secure, very good childhood, being raised in Europe and America, relatively affluent, not rich, but certainly we were very comfortable. I had a good education. By the time I was 20, I had my own car and a lovely girlfriend. And so what more do you want? And for many people would say, this is it. I just want this to continue. And for me at the age of 20, it was perfectly clear this was not sufficient, and I really had a great thirst to find something more meaningful. And this set me out on a spiritual quest. So it's not to say that Buddhism or any other spiritual path is elitist, that we're exclusive, that we say, oh, it's not for you, it's not for people like you. It's more from the side of people looking for happiness, that many people are really betting their lives that they will find the happiness they seek by getting all of the outer circumstances together and holding it together. And they're betting their lives on that, literally. And then there are those who, early or later in life, see that, number one, lots of luck. Who can guarantee, even if we're very smart, very hardworking, who can guarantee we'll have the perfect marriage, the satisfying job that will be secure, even in economic downturn, and that will have good health? So pursuing that is, frankly, it's a long bet. It's not a safe bet at all. Whereas if one is focusing in on the inner causes of unhappiness and unrest, the inner causes of happiness, you don't need to be lucky. Because in fact, you're going into a domain of reality over which we really do have some influence, and that is transforming, bringing about a kind of alchemy, if you like, of our own minds, that you may do whether you're rich or poor, you may do even in ill health, you may do if you're single or you have a family, you may do in solitude or in a great city. And so for those who see the need, then the spiritual path and a myriad of spiritual paths are open. But historically, I think it's always been a relative minority of people for whom this becomes a very high priority. Very much more frequently, in the words of the English philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, he said, religion, I paraphrase him, But he said in the modern world, and he said this about 90 years ago, 80 or 90 years ago, he said in the modern world, religion all too often becomes an ornament for an already comfortable life. And that is what we're really betting on and investing ourselves in, is getting the good job, the house, the family, and so forth. And then we think, oh, give me something a bit more. Oh yes, I'll go to church every Sunday, or synagogue every Sabbath, or I'll do a bit of meditation here, but as an ornament for something that's basically the central focus. Whereas in authentic spiritual practice, it's the spiritual practice that is central. And then one's job, relationships, wealth, and so forth, these are ones that are secondary. So setting out on a spiritual path fundamentally entails a radical shift of priorities.